So this Sunday, what we're doing, well, we're doing two things actually, and I'd commend this to you. Our midweek service, which for us is on Tuesday night, not quite midweek, is much more contemplative, and so the music that we use and that sort of thing is much more contemplative. And the feedback we got from this past Tuesday night was that doing it online was amazingly effective, that people were able to, in their living room or in their offices or wherever they were, to actually participate in a contemplative service, listening to music and singing along, or listening to the scriptures being read, or the Lectio Divina thing. All of those things really seemed to work this past Tuesday. It was our first experiment doing that. This Sunday will be our first experiment doing church without any congregation at all. We had a few people gathered last Sunday, and sort of spread out, but then we broadcast and recorded it. So what I'm doing this Sunday is creating a PowerPoint worship service, which will include recorded music. And I was trying to think of, like, if I was going to get the congregation who are watching to sing along. First Plymouth in Lincoln, Nebraska has some great congregational hymns online with a wonderful organist accompanying them and the congregation singing. So if you want your congregation to sort of sing some of the old hymns, there's some available out there on YouTube that are easy enough to sort of play. And I think for older members, that's really going to be meaningful. Young people, yeah, whatever. But I think for a lot of our older members to be able to have a touchstone of some of the old hymns, might be very powerful. I'm also using a video clip for a modern lesson. And we will actually read the passage, of course, for those of us that are Christians, and using the lectionary is John 9 this week. So that'll take about 15 minutes because it's the entirety of that chapter. So we'll read it. And then for me, just to sort of do a lesson. And I'm going to try, this is my decision. I don't know that it would be the right decision for you, but we're in the middle of a series, a Lenten series. So I'm going to try to continue that series in a way that will give, hopefully, the congregation that's been participating some continuity. So that's going to be sort of my approach to it this Sunday. So what I'm saying is that 75% of worship will be done with PowerPoint, videos and things like that. And then about 25% of it will be me live, speaking much like I'm doing right now. So I think there are lots of ways to do that, but I would really encourage you to consider how you can craft a worship service using music and things that is available out there on the internet already.
Yeah, the big question is really, is it going to be live, or is it going to be some sort of recording, whether a video or a PowerPoint or something like that? I think it's really quite interesting to watch. I watch the late night comedians often, and that first day that they had to do their shtick at night without an audience was really flat, right? I mean, there's so much energy generated and charisma with that audience that most of their jokes didn't work. And almost immediately, all of them switched to a much more informal, but again, still often recorded presentation. There's a reason, I think, sometimes that this is recorded live in front of an audience. They don't want to do it live all the time. So I know live streaming is quite easy, but at the same time, it also is met with some challenges. So, but the main thing is to think about, like, what platforms do we use already? Do a lot of our people on Facebook, or do they have access to YouTube, or do they even use technology at all? I mean, all of those questions also make you think about what formats and what platforms should we use to reach our congregation. Michael then already talked a little bit about the equipment they're using. I think most congregations can really get by with their phones. It's not a problem. Or if you really want to invest in something, there are lots of cameras. The DSLR cameras oftentimes will work perfectly fine. Laptops, much as we're using here, or Mevo is a streaming camera, kind of all built into one, MEVO, and I'll give you a link to that. And that even allows you to edit the right on the screen. It doesn't require anything else. But one of the things that I would strongly recommend is use tripods. I saw any number of services where someone was holding the camera, and it was not great. Other thoughts on equipment, Michael, that you've used or you've come across?
Yeah, I do think you're right. So if you want to just, you can go to my Facebook page or the church's my church's Facebook page, and see an example of the quality of just a simple iPhone. And so taking an iPhone and putting it on a tripod like this, what we did last week, I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, was we put it on this little tripod, this iPhone on the tripod, and the tripod on a music stand. Because you could raise the music stand up high and it would be at eye level, and it worked, I think, incredibly well. One of the things that my TV guy would tell you at the Cathedral Hope is that the quality of your digital camera, whether it's one like this or a mirrorless digital camera or even your cell phone, is better than the quality that we had in TV cameras that we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on 10, 15 years ago. So just the quality that's available to you now is extraordinary. But Scott's right, really making sure that you use a tripod so that it is still, so the sound is clear. And I just love Lindbergh's sort of thing is take lots of chances and leave nothing to chance. So like this webinar today is for us a rehearsal. We are actually using a camera that we will use on Sunday live, using the microphone. So you're actually my test audience for what I'm planning to do this Sunday. And even before we got on, I got on with Scott. My assistant and I created a fake Zoom meeting so that we could test it all. So test it. And let it, and then know. And I think you're right, Scott, that's the advantage of being able to record it ahead of time, is you can go back and edit it and that sort of thing. It doesn't have to be perfect. You're not gonna be perfect if you were preaching on Sunday morning, but it needs to be well thought out and no surprises. And doing it live, there's often surprises.
Yeah, you really need to, whether you're doing it live or recording, you need to think about the picture that you're presenting, because if you're preaching live and people are there, they're not staring at you 100% of the time, right? They're looking around, they're fiddling with their hymnal or whatever, and so they're distracted. But when they're watching a video, they are watching you. and so you have to think about, how is this framed? You have to think about what's the background and all these other sorts of things. Clearly, what you want to do is record in landscape though, right? You want to record that way, rather than, most of us are used to holding our cameras or whatever vertically, but that doesn't come across on the screen nearly as well as landscape. The other thing, if you are using a phone, you want to use the camera on the back of your phone rather than the selfie camera. The selfie camera is nowhere near as good a quality as the other camera. You also probably want to put the camera closer than you normally think would be adequate. You want a good medium shot, such as what you can see Michael look like right now. You want it from about slightly below your chest upward. And yeah, that's wonderful. Look at this guy playing around.
I knew it, my new toy.
That's the nice thing. It really is. That alleviates the problem of maybe having two cameras where you can get a close-up shot and then you can get it a little further back. That it'll make the video or even the live stream that much more interesting. So those are some of the other thoughts and ideas. Keep the background simple, somewhat uncluttered, but also interesting, because you know the people are going to be staring at that screen and they need to look at other things besides just your face. You don't want it to just be a talking head.
That is the advantage of using PowerPoint and images, so that it can switch back to an image and then back to you, that sort of thing. And doing that ahead of time is it's quite simple to do.
The other thing you want to think about is having good lighting. If you are recording or live streaming from your sanctuary, oftentimes the lighting is directly above you. And that's fine if there's plenty of ambient light coming in the windows or something, but oftentimes the light from above casts a shadow on your face. And so the top of your head might look perfectly fine, or in my case, glowing, but the rest of your face gets shadowed. And so if you're recording it or if you're setting it up to do live stream, you want to make sure that you have plenty of light off at like a 45-degree angle in front of you, so that your face is adequately illuminated. It's great if it's natural light, but if it isn't, then you have to try to recreate that with other lights in front of you. And you definitely don't want to have lighting behind you. I noticed Jill had turned the lights on and turned the lights off behind her, and all of a sudden your face just goes completely dark if there's too much light behind you. So if you have to use artificial light, make sure you have a couple of light sources, and try to stay out of the shadows, basically. And sound, Michael was talking a little bit about sound, but just as we don't always think about the lighting, we often don't think about the sound and ambient sounds that our ears tune out if it's natural. But the recording picks up those sounds, and someone watching the recording or listening to it is going to hear every one of those little pieces. I rustle my paper and you can hear it, right? Or if there's a little bit of a breeze blowing, I'm sure you've all heard the reporters that don't have the screens on.
And again, experiment with it. I mean, it's even before you all joined us, I tried 3 different ways of doing this, whether to do it with an external mic. We happen to have a decent one that we bought, or to use the earphones with the built-in microphone, which is I think what Scott's using now, or the microphone on the computer. That was actually the second best sound. So I think there are lots of ways to do it, but just you have to try out with your equipment what's working the best. And so having someone else listen to it ahead of time is really important. And
that's where doing recording is great, because if you do a recording, then you can tweak with the sound, and you can improve your presentation just by doing some editing and that sort of thing. The same is true of audio editing. If you may not even use the video, just use an audio, and audio files are incredibly easy to tinker with. But
well, and think about the popularity of podcasts. I mean, that's all that is an audio sound. So don't just dismiss that. I think it's harder to do something with video. I think you're also going to have to, if this is going to go on a while, and it looks like it certainly may go on through for Christians Palm Sunday and Easter. We're going to have to get creative and do some different kinds of things, and maybe different kinds of services in different settings you may have to do. And they can be short things too. So we're going to have to get creative here if this is going to go on for a little while.
Yeah, somebody asked about software programs. We'll talk a little bit in a minute or two about video editing software programs. The audio editing, Audacity is an inexpensive, and even you can download it for free, and very simple program that allows for audio editing. I've used that dozens and dozens of times. The other thing to think about, and I'm the worst person in this because I talk with my hands and move around all the time. You notice how still Michael is. One of the ways to improve your presentation, right, is to stand and look at the camera and don't fidget, and try not to move as much. You know, we sometimes try when in preaching to be more animated and to draw people in, but that doesn't translate nearly as well on the camera. I was watching one service last week, and the camera was focused on the pulpit, and the preacher was preaching, and as typical preachers do, walking around, but there was no one with the camera. So the person would walk off the camera and then come back on the camera and walk off the other direction. And wasn't using it like Stephen Colbert for a joke. I mean, but it was really a joke. And, you know, so that again, not as effective.
And so if you have notes, and some of us need like notes and those sorts of things, most of us don't have teleprompters. So having someone standing behind the camera with you know, big sheets of paper with notes written on them to remind you what's coming next and that sort of thing keeps you looking at the camera. I looked at our Tuesday night service, and the person doing it from their living room did a great job, except he kept, of course, looking down at his notes, and then you see the sort of the top of his head and that sort of thing, and you lose track of like what's going on when he loses eye contact with it. So as much as you can, put your notes under the camera or behind the camera or those sorts of things, or on the wall behind the camera if you can, whatever you need to do to sort of make that happen. Whenever I preach extemporaneously, as it were, I almost always have on the front pews big things just to remind me what's coming next, and I can just sort of glance out at them, and I don't have to like pick up. Now, you know, sometimes picking up something or taking your glasses on or putting them, you know, that can be effective. So, you know, you do that, but constantly looking down and having someone watch you at the top of your head is not a good idea. So make eye contact with the camera, pretend you're talking to your best sermon listener, the most reactive person in your congregation, because you very well may be.
One of the things, some of you know that I've studied megachurches for nearly 30 years, and one of my major points to other congregations is to get a camera and do image magnification, because even in small congregations in New England, you can't see the facial expressions of a person. And when I've talked with people in megachurches, they talk about, well, the pastor was talking right at me, and that's because of that very thing. They're talking at the camera, and a person is seeing it as if they're staring in my eyes. You know, it can be a very powerful tool. If you're recording, then you can edit. And you can remove dead air, and you can remove the pauses, and you can remove mistakes and all of those unnecessary things. If you're live streaming, they're all in there. And unless you've done this for a long time, there are ways that you can tinker with the sound and do some other things in live streaming to make it better. But if you really want a professional, polished piece, then in some ways, recording it is a little bit better. And there are all kinds of software out there. Camtastic is one I've used. If you're an Apple world person, iMovie is really a very good and inexpensive, obviously, editing software. WeVideo is another one. Adobe Premiere, also I've heard good things about. And Corel Video Studio is another one that's relatively inexpensive and pretty easy to use. Also, as I said, the Mevo camera has built into it some editing capabilities. So that's another good thing. But enough of those. We're almost at our time. But I want us to raise a few more things as you think about your church being a kind of digital church, a virtual church as well. There's a lot of other things that people come to Sunday worship for than just the sermon. And if you're just doing the sermon online, that's great. But then how do you pick up those other pieces of why somebody comes, right? The greetings and the fellowship and the prayers and the offering, the music, the Christian ed, even the bad coffee and the gossip, right? All of those things are part and parcel of what makes up a worship service. And so how can you then begin to think about using technology to replicate some of those features of why people are gathered together? Obviously, we can talk about some of those when we do the Q&A, but you know, you may want to think about sending out daily tweets or messages. If a lot of your congregation uses Facebook, then use Facebook to make announcements or to uplift people, or use Zoom to get work done, to gather the youth group together. I thought Steve, again, I love Stephen Colbert. Him and his team are incredibly creative. So he went from a dead audience, right, an empty theater. The next night he presented his whole evening sitting in his bathtub, surrounded by bubbles, doing his shtick, and it was fantastic. It was riveting. The very next night, he's doing it in his backyard, sitting by his fire pit, and I'm thinking, what great way to talk with the teens and the young adults and the adolescents in your, you know, to do a service like that. I saw another pastor who was doing the children's sermon, right? Picked up the puppet and was talking, and that was incredibly engaging. I mean, it really was, but it was also part and parcel of the full worship service, the way one would do that. So the kids all run in for the puppet, and then what? They all run away, you know. So it's probably better to think about each of these aspects of what normally is part of a worship service in discrete pieces. Do a separate little video for the kids so that the kids have something. Send out to the parents, you know, some workbooks or some material that the kids could do when they're home from school now, right? There's a bunch of ways you can replicate that. Don't try to create the whole full worship service in a 90-minute video where people get bored after the first 20 minutes. Instead, break it up in discriminate pieces and think about it not just on Sunday, but on other days of the week. How can we reinforce the fact that we need comforting, we need support, we need to be together, if at least virtually, if not physically. And there's also many other ways that we can be church, and you want to talk about some of those, some of the work of the church, Michael?
You know, this is not my first pandemic. I actually survived
That's right.
the AIDS crisis in the 80s and 90s and pastored the largest LGBTQ church in the world. We had 1,500 funerals during that time. So this hasn't rattled me in ways it might have other people. The other thing, so this is just some of the things that we learned during that crisis. Many of the other predominantly gay and lesbian churches around us died during that time, or diminished completely, or it stopped them. And our church became a mega church during that time because we got creative and energized about how we could be church to people, not just our people, but to out beyond our own walls. And what that did was lay the groundwork of a church that is even today, now almost 30 years later, a national church, because it was a church that decided it was going to do what it could for as many people as it could, rather than withdraw inward and just care for its own. And so we got creative about how to do that, and did a good bit of it virtually, because we decided that we would be the church to LGBTQ people in small towns in America. And so we had to use the internet and lots of different kinds of ways to stay connected and to provide pastoral care. And so we created buddy teams. We called them care bearers, and used teddy bears as sort of the symbol for that. And these folks were in constant contact with folks who were ill or isolated. And, you know, when we started, we didn't know what was causing AIDS. And so we didn't know but what interpersonal relationships was dangerous. What we decided, though, and I respect that you may make a different kind of decision, was that there were times when we would just be courageous and would visit people who were ill, because fear and isolation was what was most deadly to some folks. So you're going to have to figure out ways to connect with your folks and stay connected, because the last thing that they need is to feel this isolation, that they're out there alone, particularly older members for whom church is their family. Their kids have moved away, their grandkids live in a distance, and seeing one another on Sundays is really what keeps them alive. And so you've got to figure out ways to be church to them. And tragically, they also are the people who are least technically equipped, and whose health is most endangered by this current virus. So we really are going to have to work at that. And I think that while our communications folks at Agile Church would say, you shouldn't send out too many emails and that sort of thing, I think this is the time to throw that out the window, so that you figure out a way to almost daily be in touch with folks, because you're talking about folks who are at home alone, and who maybe their email or their Facebook or whatever they're using is their only connection with the world. It was funny, my mother and father are very active in their home church in South Georgia, but I talked to my mother yesterday, and she said that she listened to our worship service on Facebook Live. And we were church for her in South Georgia. Those are the folks that I think are going to need you most. And so, like, I write a daily devotion that goes out to thousands of people. I wouldn't recommend that because it's a really tough thing to do. But for the next 6 weeks, maybe that's what you should do. It doesn't have to be a complete, 500-word devotion. But pick out a passage of scripture and write 2 or 3 sentences about it, particularly around fear and anxiety and hope, and send it out to your congregation. Mobilize your folks who are able to call, and so that everybody in the congregation, particularly every older person in the congregation, gets a phone call with someone checking in on them. There is, I believe this because this happened to me, there is the possibility that when this is all over, your church or synagogue or mosque will be stronger and healthier and better positioned to do ministry in the 21st century. I mean, this virus is forcing us to do things like this on Zoom, and forcing us to actually come into the 21st century in lots of ways. So I just want to encourage you that this is an opportunity as well as a challenge. But your job as a religious leader in the 21st century is to meet the challenge and to help your institution do that, to not be overwhelmed, which is, it's easy to do, but be creative and try new things. So if it doesn't work, so what? Scott and I are doing this webinar without knowing if any of you are going to show up, and here you are. And it's particularly with the recording, who knows who will hear it years from now. I had an email just this past week from someone who was deeply touched by a sermon I preached that was recorded and uploaded to YouTube 6 years ago. So you never know. We're still reading scripture from thousands of years ago, and people may hear a word of hope hundreds, dozens of years from now or weeks from now that you spoke. And so find ways to get that message out there. That's my encouragement. The church doesn't have to die. Our faith communities don't have to die as a result of this, but it's going to require us to be energetic and creative, try lots of things, make lots of mistakes, take some risks. It's all okay. My theory about ministry is if no one will die, give it a try. So I'd encourage you to do that. Be as creative and hope-filled as you can, because your people need that more than anything else right now.
Amen. So I was going to talk about online giving, but it doesn't fit there. No. But I mean, obviously, you also have to think about those kinds of things. How do we continue with our funding, and how do we have committee meetings and move? How do we organize our people to get our shut-ins have food and all of those things, and that can be done with simple tools as much as more complex tools, right? I mean, we all have cell phones. If not all of our people may have computers or may be on Facebook or may go to YouTube or whatever, but we do have folks who can make deliveries of food. We can set up buddy systems and check in with people in a larger church that might have already broken down into cell groups and smaller group meetings. They're all responsible for each other. That isn't always the case when we're at 100 people, right? We have our friends, but we don't have sort of assignments. And a way of thinking about that is maybe getting more intentional about making those kinds of assignments. And if you're not doing online giving currently, I would strongly recommend now is the time that you can force that through the board and get that to happen, because
our consulting company, one of the things that we say is, if you hire us to help with stewardship, this will be your last pledge campaign ever. And if more churches had listened to us already, you'd be in much better shape, because our purpose is to get people from making pledges and weekly gifts to doing recurring gifts, to sign up to give electronically and to get as many of your members do that as possible. Your website should have a way in which people can give electronically. And so the simplest thing, I mean, you can call us, we'll help you get whatever setup you need set up. We can help you update your website. But the simplest way to do this is, if you have a way to give through your website, go to that giving page, copy the hyperlink there into an email and send it out to everybody. As your way of offering. This Sunday, actually, when the time of offering comes up, that's what'll come up on the screen, is that link on our website where people can go, click on it, and give their offering. This really is, again, the great opportunity to shift your congregation from giving in the Sunday offering to giving automatically, recurringly, because recurring giving will increase your annual giving 18%. If you can just get your congregation to go from pledges to filling out a recurring giving form, you can increase your, so this is your opportunity, so that when church comes back and you go back to normal meetings, the offering plate really won't matter all that much, because your congregation is giving electronically. So then that when the offering plate passes, you can give it away. give away to missions or important, causes, valuable things, that sort of thing. This is a great opportunity to make a shift in the church that will pay dividends for years to come.
A national survey we did in 2015 showed that if you had online giving, the giving per capita was up about $115 a person, just if you had it. And if you actually had online giving and emphasized it, used it, tried to encourage the people to use it, giving, per capita giving was up $300 per person over congregations that didn't have it. So, I think Michael is absolutely right there. You should have done this years ago, but do it now, So I know we're running out of time. There are many questions that people have put in the chat. Some we've covered, but not all of them. I'll look through this, but if someone has a verbal question, you can unmute yourself and let us know, and I'll take a look at what some of the other questions were. Anyone have a question?
Or maybe some wisdom to offer.
Or one of the things you tried. Somebody asked about whether you could split screen if you're doing a Zoom meeting. Can you pull up other kinds of content and like a PowerPoint or something? There is a little button at the bottom that's called Share, and if you click on Share, then I could bring in any other screen that I have. So now I just pulled in a PowerPoint, and I could run this PowerPoint. This is actually the data from 2015 on how many congregations used streaming or other social media or blog or Twitter, and you can see it's not a whole lot compared to things like websites and texting and other things. And then I can stop that share, and I could go over and pick up Michael's sermon from last week, and you can see what his video was, and the way it's laid out, and it's interesting. He's kind of nice in the center. If you think about the rule of thirds, right? He's up in the upper corner there. So, and again, we can.
Live streaming allows you to use two screens and switch back and forth. Just the live stream software. Exactly. So you can show your PowerPoint on one computer and then switch back to the camera. I think that's really helpful. Yeah, to keep something interesting.
Yeah, when using screen share, yeah, everyone sees what you're showing. Yeah, except that I think maybe from Michael's clip, I didn't share my screen, but you did see the PowerPoint there. What else? Now is, in some ways, now is a time to be, Michael and I both teach in our doctorate of ministry, and we're always trying to push people to be creative and to be innovative. And it's always difficult because everybody's stuck in the same deep ruts. Well, now we're in a situation where we're completely out of those ruts, right? So now is the time to really do the children's service from the bathtub, right? Or, try something else really off the wall that maybe will push people to be more accepting of change and of innovation when all this is done.
What is the name of the church in Washington, D.C. that does such a great job with children's ministry, virtual children's ministry?
Yeah, it's an African-American megachurch, but yeah, they actually do, they do videos of all of their essentially Sunday school lessons, because they realize that even in a normal world, right, their kids are only going to be able to be there once a month or every other week. And if if they're really trying to teach them lessons across, you know, a whole quarter, an average student isn't going to get very many of those. And so they create these videos that they watch when they're there. It's not live even when they're gathered together physically. But if they miss a week, they can still go pick up the videos off the web. And that's a great idea, right? In some ways, that's what I was suggesting with the puppets. If every week you do a children's service with puppets, well, record that, keep that, archive that on your website, because that ends up becoming a lesson for the kids, and for kids who are outside of your church that might accidentally find it. A good time to be really creative and push the boundaries.
I have a question.
Yes. Hello, Jill.
Hello, Scott. How are you?
Good.
Doctor Ministries folks.
Hi. Hi, Michael. We're talking about ordinary worship services here, but I am mindful that we may be called upon to do some extraordinary worship services here. And I'm thinking particularly about funeral services, which has a whole different, as you know, whole different vibe. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about that.
I was reading an article just today about what Italy is doing about that. And this particular article said that mostly what they were doing were graveside, so that people could be outside and have more space and that sort of thing. Yeah, so I don't know what we're going to be able to do around that, but I do think that providing pastoral care virtually is going to be a whole new sort of way to do that. And I will say this, that one of the things that I discovered with HIV/AIDS is that this is a generational thing as well. There was a young man who probably was in his 20s maybe, and he was out of town, and I sent him a text and an email about his loss and all that. And the next time I saw him at church, he was just effusive about how cared for he felt. Now, if he had been 60 or 70, that would have been very different. The text and email would not have felt caring to them. But to him, it was really meaningful that I personally noted it and responded and reached out to him. And so I think it is going to be a generational thing to try to figure out how we provide pastoral care.
That's true.
Thanks.
You know, I'm looking through the chat feature a little bit, and it's really impressive what some of you have tried already or are thinking about doing, creating a kind of buddy system of high school kids and young adults with older folks, and doing some different types of worship in videos or online, doing some meditations, all of those kinds of things. That's really excellent. I want to applaud you for being creative like that. Other questions, or something that we haven't covered? One of the things that I did want to say that I hadn't is you do have to be careful if you are using music that's licensed, even if you have a license to use the music in a worship format. That isn't the same as having a streaming license for that recording or that piece of music online. It's a separate license, and I know of a number of churches who were live streaming and got thrown off of Facebook or got thrown off of YouTube because it was identified that they didn't have a streaming license for that material. So that's certainly something you need to think about. If you really do want to use music, then you need to look into the streaming license as well. There might be a way that you could use the music in a video and keep that in a private area, like a private Facebook group or something, and not have to do the streaming license. But You'd have to check with others that know that better, but I do want to make sure that you're aware of that copyright stuff. Yeah. Other questions? As I said, we'll have the recording of this, or at least most of the recording of this. Oh yes, Maria, do you have a question?
Well, I was going to just point out two things. I've done a couple of, I think if you're a small church or a small community,
yep,
there are some liberties you can take for the right reasons. I've done a couple of social justice campaigns where we used, for example, Beyonce's music to save a high school. And some people said, well, you're going to get in trouble for that. No one ever contacted us because it was a small thing within a small town, actually a county. It was a county-wide issue, So in that sense, and then every church has got creative artists. This is a good time for us to be sharing our own stuff.
That's
and
exactly
creating our own stuff. We have time, we have quiet. We can't watch that TV all day long. Turn it off and let's do some writing and then share that back and forth and create our own little community of music. I miss that about church. I do. Can I just share one third little thing?
Yeah.
For the smaller churches of the world. I'm not doing parish ministry right now. I'm organizing for, well, I won't say why I'm organizing, but the list, I've got 3 or 4 different lists that we use to keep things going. Yeah, one, of course, is MailChimp. It is phenomenal for, because you can code things and then, keep your committees separate from your volunteers, from new outreach, fund, donors, whatever. You can keep that separated. So far, the one piece that I have found useful for online fundraising, I use SurveyMonkey to do the little surveys and get the data from the person. And at the bottom of it, you can put in a button to donate money. It happens to be Stripe is the name of the company. And what I like about it is they don't take 10% the way ActBlue or some other thing does. They just take 2.5%. Stripe is what it is. So that's pretty good in terms of, for the smaller churches and whatnot who they can't afford administrative costs. But thank you so much for this. This was very, very helpful. And I hope that all those other sessions that people have asked for will happen, really.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you. Those were wonderful suggestions. And as I was saying, most of this will be recorded and up there. I had forgotten to push the record button until a moment into it, but it'll be up there, and we'll also have a link to some of the notes and some other links that are included with helpful suggestions and how-tos to do some of the things that people ask for. So
well, can we put a comment section beneath so that you all can continue to let us know what your good ideas are?
Yeah, possibly. And the Hartford Seminary will post this also on the Facebook page, and so that's a good place too to put some comments, both of other things that we could do at the seminary that would help you, but also if you have some of these great ideas that were in the chat of the things that people are trying. Right, we're all in this together, right? This isn't an isolated incident of the Gulf or somewhere else. And the more, just like Maria said, a community of musicians putting out music that could be used license-free. I think the same is true with ideas, right? The more ideas that we come up with and get them out there, that's so much better. I'm running a thing with young, innovative clergy right now that Michael and others are a part of, and it's wonderful to hear the ideas that people have. You don't always get a chance to hear those and learn from those, and that's a wonderful way to distribute some of that stuff. Now, it's an unusual time, and we need all the creativity and all the innovative ideas that we can get.
Yeah, this is unparalleled. I mean, we're all making this up as we go along. So you're as creative as any of us. So please do, when you have some insights and something that actually works, let us know so we can all learn from one another.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know lunch is over. We've come to the end, and I want to thank all of you for participating, for being here. Hopefully, this was helpful and stimulating, and gets you to think about how you do your presentation and your worship and your life as a congregation together in a kind of digital way, at least for a brief time. So thank you all, and let us know if we can help. Our emails will be up there as well, so you can get in touch with us too. Okay. Well, thank you all very much.
Thanks.
Stay healthy. Hibernate.